All right, so we are going to Gregory.
Okay,
Hello.
sorry. It needed to close it out to apply that setting.
Well, it's great to see you,
It is great to see you.
and you are being recorded.
I
Are you
okay. You
are
can't
you
share
good
the
with that?
video. You can share the audio.
You look great. You're
But we
one of
can't.
the
My
few.
hair is so fucking long. My place hasn't even opened yet. They're not going to open for a
I
while.
was actually going to recommend
Terrible.
extensions to make it even longer.
I could do that. I've almost gotten to the point because I found, these are all the little things, right, that you don't think about. Because I'm working in the office and there's nobody, here except me and Hank, and then sometimes our office manager, one or two other people might come in on every now and then. I found these like fantastic little wool slippers, and it's just like
Do
Mr. Rogers, man. You come in, you take off your normal shoes, you put on the slippers, putter around in the office with the slippers, and then you go home.
That's elegant.
So I'm like one bathrobe away from being the dude off the Big Lebowski.
This is great. You you're a designer and you have found an elegant
One there.
solution.
It was like, what? Wait, you pixelated.
I said that you're a designer and you've quite literally found an elegant solution.
I don't know if it's an elegant solution. I think it's like the slow descent into madness, right? I mean, it's
No,
like,
that's if you were wearing Kleenex boxes on your feet.
that would be true. I'm not that far
No.
gone. No, the hair is just like, the same person I mentioned to you. And for the record, right, this whole conversation started because I told Gene, I said, because you told me you were enjoying this
Yes.
little respite of having to go into the office because, from a personality standpoint, like I don't have to see people, I don't have to talk. I'm liking the kind of solitude here and all that. And how you phrased it at that moment was the exact same way another friend of mine phrased it, who I know is a very extroverted introvert, meaning she clocks out as a extrovert. I mean, an introvert on the scales, but she is extroverted. I'm sorry, the other way around. She clocks in as an extrovert when she takes the test, but she is a very reserved, almost shy extrovert, right? So get her talking to people that she knows, and everything's great. Put her in a room full of 1,000 people that she doesn't know, and she can force herself to do it, but doesn't like doing it.
Yes.
She'd much rather just check out and leave.
Some of my happiest times are are being alone in the woods completely.
It is,
I like people. I like being alone.
yeah, I know. So it's funny. There's more of a phenomena. I've looked this up because I'm in the same category.
Oh, by the way, let me just quickly mention, as I do on all of these episodes,
Yeah.
some little observation. You may have the computer on either a wobbly table back down.
No, I keep banging the table.
Okay, I said, or there's an earthquake where you are.
No, I'm it's close to the edge of the table, and I keep bumping the table.
Okay, well now
I will try for image stabilization. Wait, I'm going to go for orthogonal perspective.
orthogonal perspective. You,
There we go.
your academic side is coming out.
No, it's not. So, this whole thing, I've read like, I don't know, 16 articles now on how we're all going to change the way they work. I've literally seen both CBRE, I found this out in the last day or two. See, if I hit the table, that's what happens. CBRE has released, I don't know if you've seen this. Have you seen their 6-foot office?
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a PDF, right?
Yeah.
Here's all the ways we're going to make you Corona happy. Night
Corona happy.
has a whole series of things, and they're actually starting to charge money to work with clients to rebalance their office spaces once to get people back into them. Right? It's the same principle. AIA an hour ago released their guidelines on how to modify your office to make it more COVID friendly. And they have one coming for schools, and they have one coming for a bunch of other places. And all of those are tactical, right?
Yes.
In my mind. And I get it, you know, there's a moment when you got to have some tactical responses, right? Like you're going to see hand sanitizers at the front of the doors, you know, you're going to see a whole bunch of other stuff. But I think the thing that when you and I were talking that like sticks out is, what does all this mean a year from now?
Right.
What does this all mean like 5 years from now? And, you know, and I'm genuinely interested as
we're speaking, can you lower there? Now we're getting to see you. Now
if I lean back in the seat, I'm really screwed. Is that better?
It is. We're getting a little bit more of like, you know, the body language, which is helpful. Before we were getting something
you're
more.
Getting the underside of my chin.
We were getting this before.
That's right.
Okay. So yes, Greg.
But who?
Let's get to your.
How many of us? No. But this is part of it. How many of us 6 weeks ago had to think about how I look on a Zoom on a daily basis?
Not many.
I mean, there are people, but like really.
So I have a very maybe ridiculous, or maybe at a minimum pretty simplified thought based upon your questions, and also you sharing with us these tactical approaches or applications. To me, the obvious is just becoming more obvious these days. And it's like, you know, if you want to fix your relationship with the traffic problem that is Atlanta, don't get into traffic.
Yep.
If you don't want to like be sitting on top of someone, don't sit on top of someone. And I remember being at this Congress for the New Urbanism, and Dewani was there, and like whatever, like some of the plans that he's done and I've liked, and some I haven't loved, and whatever. But he's talking about lean urbanism and talking about how he went to this home and it had this huge wall of glass. And he was thinking about conditioned space. Mm-hmm. And he asked the owner of the home, and I think this was in Spain, and folks who have English as a, you know, second or third language always speak a much better English, a more clear, straightforward language, right?
Most of the time.
Yes. And so he goes, how do you keep it cool in here? And the guy went over to one side of it and grabbed the curtain and drew it across the glass.
Yeah.
Keep the sun out. And I think, like, to your question, it's like about how are we all going to be, and what are we going to be in a year or 5 years? We're going to be what we're going to be. And we're going to, I think, take the obvious cues at that moment. And I have to laugh. I mean, like, great for CBRE and others for trying to like come up with, you know, these applications, but this thing's changing minute to minute.
Yeah, and I don't fault the need for somebody who's invested, you know, a lot of money in their office space and has a kind of workflow in there that says, you know, hey, look, we need to make this more safe, but we also need to bring people back because it is genuinely affecting the way that we work, at least in this immediate term.
Yes. Saying,
how do we do this in as safe and kind of, responsible a manner as we can, especially since there is some small part of nobody's resolved. Like if I invite my employees back or tell them they need to come back and I'm not doing proper sanitary procedures or something, am I liable? Right? Like, I don't think we've solved all these kind of questions yet. So I get the tactical part of this.
As long as it's not taken as the gospel. It's tactical for the moment.
It's tactical for the moment.
The moment could be 6 months or a year or 2 years. We don't know yet.
But let's say it's the next 18 months, right? In that 18 months, we're gonna all be asked, how do we draw conclusions from this going forward? I mean, one of the things that I don't know that a broker or a commercial real estate developer wants to hear, but one of the outcomes.
Are you putting me into that category?
But one of the things that came up was, what happens if you start to realize, hey, I can keep 20% of my workforce working from home and maybe having a small hotel touchdown space, or they just use our conference rooms. And I don't need, I can go from 30,000 to 15,000 square feet and
Right.
still make this work.
Well, so be it.
I think it will be there, but I think it will shake up what that market looks like. And I think that's what I'm saying we're all going to have to figure out how to adjust to.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. I like about, and I'm not saying that you or anyone else is right or wrong about that quite yet. What I'm saying is this is making the obvious more obvious. It's like, I read an article this morning about all of a sudden, like, all these retail establishments are closing. Well, yeah. You've been into a shopping mall in the last decade? They're empty. Like,
not Linux, but yeah, when I couldn't get my Apple stuff done, it's never
insane. But like, you could go into something at Linux, like go try to buy like a pillow at Linux. You're going to be the only person there.
Probably.
And if you buy Nike, that's a different story. But like, I just think that this is exposing what we already knew is the obvious. And it goes for restaurants too. If you are a 300 or 400 or 500 seat restaurant, come on.
You probably got, you're in real trouble. But
and I don't think office is dead. You remember this?
No.
You like music, right?
A little bit. Yes.
A little bit. Yeah. Do you recall about 8 to 10 years ago when music was dead? Music itself wasn't dead, but the music industry was dead.
The music industry, it definitely had some issues.
Right.
Still has its issues.
But it has evolved. What it was is it needed to evolve. So everyone was all worried about streaming music and what would that do? And it didn't mean that you weren't going to have music anymore. And because office or retail or restaurant needs to evolve doesn't mean that we won't shop and eat and have a place to go work. It's going to be different.
Correct. Well, and I think what's interesting though, and especially in light of kind of the analogy of music is, or the music industry is, I look at this and start to wonder a couple big questions. So the big questions for me are, how does, and I saw this stat this morning because I need to ground what I'm about to say in this stat. So before February 14th, they estimate roughly 4% of the U.S. workforce worked from home. Okay, yeah. These are people that measure this stuff. By the end or middle of April, we were at 34% of the US workforce working from home. Now, you couple that with 30% are unemployed, potentially, or 33 million people are unemployed. I don't really know, who's left in their traditional office
Maybe
anymore.
10%. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't really know who's in a traditional office anymore. But what this is going to start to push out, to come back to the analogy, is where is some of the power in the office dynamic going to stay at the end? In other words, before, if I'm the employer, I could demand pretty much you show up, if I wanted, demand you show up here, right? And we could say there were more enlightened companies that would figure out work from home arrangements and for some of their employees. But people who've worked at home, especially if they can prove that they are more productive.
Yes. Listen, I get
You
it.
have now flipped the dynamic on the employer, right?
Yeah, I get it. And it's a great question. You are an architect.
Some days.
I would say some days.
Some days.
You are a
You got to
teacher.
play trial lawyer today, so go ahead.
You're a teacher. You're a designer who creates products.
Yep.
In your architecture focus part of Gregory, you all work on churches and other things, but among your scope of work are churches. How many people are praying at home?
Yeah, I have no idea.
And is it any different really than congregating in an office? You know what I'm saying? No, it's not. You have to figure out, everyone has to figure out, we're all talking about office now because it's the easiest, most, obvious thing, because in part because of Zoom, frankly, because it's like, oh, we're using this thing now to connect. But how many people before, I'd like to see a stat on this. How many people worked at home compared to those amount of people who prayed at home? I would be willing to bet you that more people prayed at home and worked at home who are now not able to go where they had a physical space outside the home to pray or congregate. And that's a pretty big part of life, is spirituality and or religion, whether you are practicing in your denomination or not, right? So I will now like to flip the conversation to you about congregation and prayer.
So, it's kind of, in my own views on this are going to be kind of tempered, I guess, by my own religious beliefs, but on a certain level. But I think to answer the latter, well, the first part of that question about,
it was a long question.
To get to the first part on congregating, no, I don't think anything in this crisis is going to cause us to want to substitute or replace a need to congregate in person, right? That I can't imagine that happening. I mean, my experiences that way are that we're a little more eager, if anything, to wave to somebody when we're walking in the neighborhood or something like that, because we don't get as much interaction as we used to. The act of something like prayer being influenced by this, I think on some level, it largely depends on what is your self-reflective capacity to decide you want to pray to begin with. Meaning, prayer has a kind of communal aspect to it for sure. It is primarily, at least in the Judeo-Christian tradition, a more solitary individual exercise, right? So some of this may depend. If you're a mosque or you're Islamic, and you are used to going to the mosque to pray as a kind of communal prayer every day at 3:00, you have seen a very different change in your routine, right? That doesn't mean that you still won't at 3:00 face east and offer up your prayers. It doesn't mean that somebody who is Christian can't find the time to do a devotional or to pray in different ways. But I don't know that either of those go away. I don't think that.
And I don't think they do either. Just like work's not going away.
I definitely think there's people who are going to not pray as often as they might by going to the church, but the outcome of that is you have to probably do a little bit more self-introspection and ask yourself why.
Yeah, so and it'll be fascinating, be it going to a church, a mosque, a synagogue, or what have you. A big part or even tenet of religion is the coming together and the community-based nature of religion.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is going to be fascinating. And then there's an educational component to it, Sunday school.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I'm not equipped to teach Sunday school.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Or any other type of like a kindergarten or anything like that. And like, we haven't had that conversation broadly yet. We've talked a lot about homeschooling. We haven't talked about Sunday school homeschooling. Not that I've heard.
Which I can't imagine is happening in a meaningful, interactive sense. I could see potentially churches starting to say, here are materials to look over with your kids on Sunday, and you can print them out or something.
And you can tune in. Like they have that type of online virtual learning, and that happens. What's being missed, and that's this bringing it up in terms of religion. I think might or hopefully like illuminate this connection between people and place, which is really what we're talking about, and how they evolve. And we all need and want, even the most introverted or extroverted or introverted extroverted of us. We want to be around people and we want to be away from people. So I think that, office and how we work is going to change, and there'll be more people working from home. There may be more people praying from home.
I think maybe. That's an interesting question to say if you take it outside of, because I might kind of frame your question in the context of what...
You're the great framer.
Yeah. What institutions are, because a school and office, in a certain sense, you're required to congregate, right? You come to the office because you get a paycheck from the company that's employing you, and they've asked you to come to the office. You go to school, you congregate at school because somebody from child services will come around to your home if your child's not in school. But you know what I mean? Like, so, but there are people that home work and there's people that home school. But I think what you're getting at, though, is what is the way in which we define community and place, or coming to a place, when it's voluntary. And church is voluntary. Nobody compels you to go. Nobody compels you to go to a sports event. Nobody compels you to go to a music venue, right? And to the degree that we have tended to focus on reopening the mandatory institutions, our offices, our businesses, our schools, we have, I agree, spent almost no time, and maybe sports gets exempted from this, But we've spent almost no time talking about the voluntary places we congregate.
Right. And it really does. You're a designer, and design is applied to everything. And when I used to hear that, I was like, yeah, you're a designer saying that. I believe it though. And right now, like broadly, we've been talking about like restaurants, retail, office. Now we're starting to talk about places of worship. We're going to start talking about places of sport, places of festival. Any place that a person can go, that it's more than like a handful of people, we're going to be talking about how that changes. And that is part of the exciting opportunity of all this, the creativity that comes with it. Like I was just thinking on this call, what if, concerts started being, in on lakes, and everyone just brings their boat, and you got more than 6 feet and you're on your boat and you're listening. Will there be a concert venue that is a lake? Probably.
Well,
There probably exists one now. I just don't even know about it.
Well, no, so there is one down in Florida that they've been trying to rehab. Have you ever seen that one? The old
in Miami?
Yeah, the one that's on the stadium that's right on the water. They used to do
it's
like
gorgeous, but you still watch it from the shore, right?
You do watch it from the shore. You're on shore. The musicians were on a barge.
Let's flip it. Everyone else is on their own little barge, and the musicians are on shore. Anyway, it's a fun thing to imagine.
But, so I'm kind of curious
about going to the zoo. How are we going to go to the zoo?
So, and not give the animals COVID. I'm kind of curious though when I go through some of that, because I agree there's a moment here that I don't know that we've had in our lifetimes. I don't think the recessions we've been through were quite the same thing, because everything has just come to a halt so quickly, right?
Everything has changed so quickly. I actually don't think it's a halt as much of
a better way to say it. But we made huge changes very quickly, right? And I mean, the recession, no recession I've ever been through in my entire life has shut down schools overnight.
Yeah, good point.
No recession has shut down the physical offices of.
No recession shut down Starbucks.
Yeah, and the restaurants and everything, right? I mean, so there is a moment when you can say, and I know work is kind of where we first started this conversation, where you can say, as we're going back, how do we rethink things? And there are going to be those kind of tactical moments. I'm kind of really curious, though, how many people want to rethink how we do these things, and are there different ways that we can imagine doing a concert or having a church service or all of this, or are people just eager to get back to the routine that they once were in?
Well, whatever they want isn't going to matter as much as what the market wants, and if the businesses would like to stay in business.
See, but the push there will be a little bit that, let's say for a church, they have real estate, they have a building, they have space inside of it. They can a lot more easily say, I'm going to X out every 6 feet in a pew, or in arrange their seats to say, here's a kind of distancing, but liturgically it's all the same. We're still having the altar up at the front, we're still having people singing, and we're still having people, a priest lead us through the service, or,
yeah, but what about
whoever?
What about at a funeral? If you can only fit 100 people that way, but the person has 300 friends, 200 can't come. I mean, like, we got some work to do, my friend.
We have some weird work to do. It's going to be kind of just this moment where I'll be curious to see who is going to lead a push to rethink these things versus somebody who says, I'm just ready to get back to the way that we were.
Well,
and I'm talking about people who are in the positions of authority,
right?
Over something. Like how many rabbis are going to say, we need to rethink how we do?
I think it's the ones who want to survive. I mean, like you're fortunate and also super talented where you're putting this level of thought into every project that I've ever seen you work on. And even just like getting together for a conversation like this one, you're a thinker. Like, other people are going to have to do that.
Some of my personality profiles say that, something. It
All
gets
right,
me into trouble.
So one of the challenges of this show, which is called You Were Saying, is that when you get together with a person like you could talk for 3 hours.
Yeah, and we only have 10 minutes.
Yes, and I'm trying to stick to that. And I do want to change the topic to something.
Good luck with that.
It's going to be hard. We're going to do it. Here is my topic change for you.
All right.
And it's one that you love.
Okay.
Chair design.
Okay. You are a bit of a chair aficionado.
I am. Tell me about
one.
What do you love about chair design?
What do I love about chair design?
Yeah, and what's your go-to chair?
So what is oh wow, that's a whole different question. The fascinating thing about chair design is that we have really haven't changed our anatomy for the last, I don't know, 100,000 years, 500,000 years, whatever. Homo sapiens have been standing upright, and yet we probably have 10 trillion different chair designs throughout history, right? So what that tells me is we've never found the perfect thing, even though the general archetype, right, of what a chair is pretty well settled. There's a lot of different expressions for it, right? Meaning I can make it look like a lump of clay. I could make it look like, a mushroom. We have bean bags, we have whatever. But the idea that I am sitting, and put that in quotation marks, hasn't changed for at least, 10,000 years that we can find examples of chairs or things to sit on. And yet it's not done. I mean, on the one hand, I'm so pessimistic about chair design specifically because you feel like there's so many bad ones out there. Right? That just keep getting done and produced, and people put money and capital and energy into making them. And you kind of wonder, why are we so compelled within something that has, on the one hand, a fairly narrow framework that we say, I'm going to invent 70,000 different ways to try to address this. And I think what it gives you a little bit of, hope on is, where am I going to go? And I'm trying to think of the painter, and I'm going to give you the analogy here. There was a painter, it may have been Frank Stella or somebody like that. I'm going to misattribute the quote here. But there, a very famous painter like that. I mean, one of the questions he asked himself was, every time he painted a painting, what am I bringing to painting as a discipline with my work? In other words, what's bigger than my need to just put some shit down on a canvas, right, and call it art?
Okay.
And I think if you're a designer who's operating from a position of,
is that the actual quote? Because I'm going to get our crack team to
something like that. I mean, his quote was almost like, what am I bringing to painting? And what he meant was, what am I bringing to the discipline? Like, what am I contributing to this huge endeavor that obviously has a lot of different expression throughout its history? And I think for something like a chair or a table, where we have just such a huge history of designs in there, I think if you're just making something to stroke your own ego, you're not really contributing to the history of what makes a great chair. And so, look, different people look at ergonomics. in different ways and proportioning. The beautiful thing is we can't really sit still for very long, right? I mean, we have to kind of keep moving. I mean, as you're doing right now. And it's because there's no
nice chair, by the way.
Yeah, you got a Pollock. Wait, is that the Knoll? Is that the Knoll Pollock?
Yeah.
Yep.
See, I told y'all, this guy knows what he's talking about.
No, I know my chairs. So, but we can't sit still, and part of that is our bodies are not made to be at rest for that long. So what's kind of interesting to me about chair design, and I will tell you my favorite chair designer, you can probably guess because we've had this conversation, was a Danish designer named Hans Wegner, who that's spelled Wegner. Go figure for those Danes and their silent W's. He did hundreds of chair designs, but I think of anybody who's really practiced in the last or designed in the last.
The wishbone chair, is that your favorite?
That is not my favorite of his. The favorite of his that I own.
The chair?
Huh?
Is it the chair?
No, the favorite of his that I own is a big, comfy chair called, the nickname of it was the Papa Bear chair. And it looks like an old wingback English chair, but it's definitely much more contemporarily styled. But what I like about it is it allows you to sit in it in a lot of different ways that I would have never guessed when I first bought the chair, meaning you can kind of crank yourself back up into the corner and drape your legs over one of the arms. You can almost sit really straight up in it, and it comes with a little ottoman, or it was designed to come with a little ottoman. There's just, like 10 or 12 postures that you can create for yourself in this seat. And so it's the idea that you get all that variety in a single chair that I really like. He did another chair.
And Greg, we do, I know you and I know me.
I'll go forever.
I'm going to conclude with this, and this could be a little bit of a stretch. I would like, though, to maybe encourage at least me and you and whoever else may watch this, that we sit in this time in a lot of different ways and see what feels right at the right time. And that could change. I'm using your own chair analogy to apply to these days and times. What do you think? Does that have any?
I think it's a good one. I actually was going to tell you, as we were going into this conversation, a very similar analogy was my first take that I wrote down and from my notes today. Like, what do I need to cover with you? If you bottom line everything that we're going through right now, part of this for me is I hope we're looking at what's my Goldilocks, right? What's not too extreme, what's not too extreme this way. What is the way that I am living that feels just right? And I think we're in that moment of trying to figure out what is my COVID Goldilocks.
I like it. Always a very
something like that.
Both deep and superficial conversation with you.
Absolutely, because you've got to be able to slide on the surface to fall off the edge, right?
Well, you're one of my favorite friends to talk to.
Thank you. You are too.
And
back at you.
To be continued.
All right.
And be well.
Same to you.
Goodbye.
Bye.